With polls now shifting uniformly in Donald Trump's favor, he's polling better at this stage than in either of his previous campaigns. Still, this remains one of the tightest elections in recent memory. With just 10 days until Election Day, we still don't have a clear favorite. Let's go ahead and fill out an electoral college map based on the latest polling averages in competitive states. I've already marked the states deemed safe or likely for each candidate. These are states where either candidate holds a commanding lead, and at this stage in the cycle, I would be truly shocked if any of these are remotely close on Election Day. Now let's dive into the competitive states by poll closing time. Starting at 7 p.m., the polls will close in Virginia and in Georgia. The Commonwealth of Virginia has trended hard to the left over the last decade or so, handing Joe Biden a double-digit margin of victory in the 2020 cycle. Now, Kamala Harris leads Trump by a narrower 6.4% based on an average of the last 5 polls. Harris has led in every single poll since taking over as the Democratic nominee, which is a significant improvement over Biden, as he had even trailed Trump in the final Virginia average prior to dropping out of the race. Nevertheless, Virginia goes in the likely blue column here based on that near 6-point advantage for Harris. For your reference here on the rating categories, now that we're so close to the election, I have slightly altered my ratings so that 0 to 2 points is tilt, 2 to 6 is lean, 6 to 10 is likely, and greater than 10 is safe. Our next state is Georgia, with 16 electoral votes at stake. This was the closest state in the 2020 cycle, as Biden narrowly edged out Trump by 0.2%, making him the first Democrat to win here since Bill Clinton back in 1992. Now here in 2024, polls show Trump building a lead of just over 2 points at 2.2%. Based on an average of 11 polls in Georgia, Trump currently polls at 49% compared to Harris's 46.8% on average, and he has led in all but one recent survey from Marist College. Although 8 of these 11 polls fall within their individual margins of error, the trend clearly shows Georgia moving in Trump's favor. So back on our map, Georgia's 16 electoral votes go into Trump's column in the lean Republican category. So Harris and Trump split the first 2 states at the 7 p.m. poll closing, lifting Harris's electoral tally to 21 over Trump's 18. 11 states to go now, plus Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, which are worth a combined 179 electoral votes. Let's now fast forward to 7:30 p.m. on election night, as the polls close in Ohio and in North Carolina. Before we dig into them, just a quick reminder. Less than 20% of you are subscribed. Take a second to click that red button below. It's completely free and helps me out a ton. Thanks a lot. The state of Ohio is no longer considered in play for the Democratic Party after Trump carried it by an 8-point margin in 2016 and again in the 2020 election. It had previously voted for Obama twice and was considered a key bellwether at that time. Now, the 2024 polls suggest that while the bleeding for Democrats in Ohio has mostly stopped, Trump should still hold the state by a similar margin as in his 2 previous elections. He leads Harris by exactly 7% right now, based on the last 7 polls released in Ohio. He is led by either 6 or 7 in the last 6, suggesting a slight underperformance relative to 2020. Yet either way, Ohio finds itself firmly in the likely Republican column, aligning with Iowa as its electoral counterpart in the Midwest. In North Carolina, the Tar Heel state now awards 16 electoral votes, following the 2020 census. According to the latest Real Clear Politics average, we're headed for yet another tight race, with Trump leading by just 0.8% based on 10 polls. Currently, Trump averages 48.6% to Harris's 47.8%. The race in North Carolina has been incredibly close since Harris officially accepted the Democratic nomination in late August. While Trump has led in most surveys, his leads have remained largely within the margin of error. That all being said, this wouldn't be the first time the polls overestimated Democrats. Remember back in 2020, Joe Biden led Trump in the final average according to 538, yet ultimately lost by 1.4%. A similar thing happened in 2016. Clinton was favored, yet Trump won the race. So while North Carolina always seems to produce a close race, Democrats have still lost 8 straight federal elections, and the polls currently suggest Trump will squeak out a narrow victory yet again. Now those 2 wins lift Trump's electoral vote total up to 181. He is now just 40 votes shy of Harris in the race to 270. Let's jump to 8 p.m. now on election night, when the polls will close in New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and in Florida. Starting in New Hampshire, this traditionally blue-leaning state backed Joe Biden by 7 points in 2020, marking a significant leftward trend compared to Clinton's narrow win of less than half a point. In 2024, the latest polling average shows Harris with a 6.3% lead based on 3 polls, with her margins at 3%, 9%, and 7% respectively. Notably, the most recent poll released just yesterday is the first to show the race within the margin of error. Returning to our electoral map, we can place New Hampshire's 4 electoral votes in the likely Democratic column for Harris. Now we turn to Pennsylvania, arguably the most critical battleground in this election cycle. It's widely regarded as the likely tipping point state. According to numerous public data-driven forecasts, Nate Silver assigns it a 32% chance of tipping the election, with both Harris and Trump seeing their odds of winning the election jump to around 90% if they secure Pennsylvania. The polling average here shows Trump with yet another narrow edge at 0.6% based on 12 polls. Every single survey shows the race within the margin of error. 8 show Trump ahead, and 4 have Harris leading. Neither candidate has led in the average by more than 1 point since early August. So for now, the Keystone State will go in the tilt Republican column, but don't be surprised if these numbers flip again before Election Day. Finally, we move to Florida, the Sunshine State, worth 30 electoral votes, making it the 3rd largest prize on the map. Once synonymous with swing state of Florida, has since moved firmly into Republican territory. Trump improved on his 2016 performance here, winning by 3.5 points in 2020, one of just 5 states where he performed better in his second go-around than in the 2022 midterm cycle. Governor Ron DeSantis and Senator Marco Rubio won their re-elections by landslide margins of 19% and 16% respectively. Now in 2024, Trump's lead continues to expand, averaging an 8.4% margin over the last 5 polls, with 2 surveys showing his lead in the double digits. This strong Republican trend has seen the Harris campaign almost completely sideline Florida this cycle, a notable contrast to Biden spending more money here than any other state in 2020. We'll place Florida in the likely Republican column, lifting Trump ahead of Harris now in the race to 270 electoral votes with 230. Before we head to the next hour, I almost forgot Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, which will also see polls close at 8 p.m. This district, urban and trending left, awarded Joe Biden a single electoral vote with a 6.5% margin in 2020. Current polls suggest Harris is heavily favored to hold it for the Democrats, possibly with an even larger margin this year, so we'll place it in the likely blue column, with 92 electoral votes remaining across 6 competitive states, all but Nevada closing at 9 p.m. Let's start with Michigan, widely seen as the most fundamentally blue of the Upper Rust Belt trio. Michigan has leaned left compared to Pennsylvania and Wisconsin in recent cycles. Trump carried Michigan by a razor-thin 0.2% in 2016, but by slightly larger margins in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, at around 0.7% each. Then, as Biden successfully flipped these states back into the Democratic column in 2020, he carried Michigan by nearly 3 points, compared to Pennsylvania by 1.2% and Wisconsin by just 0.6%. In 2024, polls show Trump with an exceptionally narrow 0.2% lead in Michigan based on the latest 9 polls, though Harris led in 2 of the last 3 added to this average by 3 points or more. We may see the average shift back in her favor soon. For now, though, Michigan joins Pennsylvania in the tilt Republican category. I tend to view Michigan as a must-hold state for Harris. Without it, her path to reaching 270 electoral votes looks incredibly challenging. Moving to Wisconsin, often considered the most Republican-friendly among the Upper Rust Belt trio, both demographically and politically. Wisconsin's population is predominantly white, more religious, and has a lower percentage of college-educated voters compared to its neighbors. Should Trump yet again overperform among the white working class, that effect would be especially pronounced in Wisconsin. Nevertheless, Trump has consistently pulled worse here against Biden, and now Harris compared to Pennsylvania and Michigan. Currently, he leads Harris by 0.2% here as well, based on an average of 9 polls, with 6 of those showing the 2 in an exact tie. Whenever we talk about polls in Wisconsin, we must remember that Trump was underestimated by extraordinary margins in 2016 and 2020. In 2016, Clinton led by nearly 6 points heading into election night, but lost by 0.8%, while Biden led by over 8 points and held on by just 0.6%. Wisconsin will be placed in the tilt red column for Trump on our map, bringing his total up to 255 electoral votes, 15 shy of the presidency, with 4 states outstanding. Wrapping up the Upper Rust Belt Quartet with Minnesota, grouped as a quartet because all 4 have voted for the same candidate in every election since 1988. Yet in 2016, Minnesota broke apart from the other 3, continuing to back the Democratic candidate by 1.5%, and then in 2020, Biden expanded the Democratic margin up to 7 points. Currently, Harris leads Trump by an average of 4.7% across the latest 4 polls, with margins ranging from Harris +3 to Harris +6. Minnesota is generally only in play for Republicans in a worst-case scenario for Democrats, which at this point seems unlikely. Therefore, we'll place Minnesota in the lean blue column on our map. Turning our attention to the Southwest, we start with Texas, a major electoral prize worth 40 votes. Democrats have long envisioned the day Texas turns blue, which would dramatically shift the balance in the Electoral College in their favor. However, recent gains by Republicans among Hispanic voters suggest Democrats may have already reached their peak in 2020 when Trump won Texas by 5.5 points, making it the most competitive result here in decades. It's difficult to see Harris narrowing that gap further this November. Currently, Trump leads Harris by a similar margin with a 6-point edge, according to an average of 5 polls. Trump is polling at 51.6% to Harris's 45.6%, consistently holding a lead outside the margin of error in every survey. Therefore, on our electoral map, Texas is marked as likely Republican, pushing Trump to 295 electoral votes, surpassing the 270 threshold needed to secure a second non-consecutive term in the Oval Office. Moving on to Arizona, the second closest state by margin in 2020. Joe Biden narrowly won its 11 electoral votes by 0.3%, with 49.4% to Trump's 49.1%, largely driven by high turnout among minority voters and college-educated whites in Maricopa County, which accounts for about 2/3 of Arizona's population. Democrats have now secured 4 consecutive major statewide elections, yet here in 2024, Trump has maintained a lead in Arizona throughout most of the cycle. Currently, his lead falls between those in Georgia and North Carolina, standing at 1.5% based on 9 polls. Trump's average here is 49.2%, with Harris trailing at 47.7%. Arizona has been the one swing state where Trump has consistently led, even after Harris became the Democratic nominee. Betting markets on Polymarket give him a 72% chance of winning Arizona, the highest odds for any swing state, indicating strong real-time public sentiment in his favor. With that, Arizona joins the swing states in the tilt Republican category, raising Trump's projected total to 306 electoral votes. This leaves only Nevada, with polls closing at 10 p.m. With its 6 electoral votes, Nevada may not carry the weight of some larger battlegrounds, but the contest here is just as competitive. This cycle represents perhaps the Republicans' best chance to flip Nevada since the Bush era. While Biden held Nevada by 2.4% in 2020, the state has shown a gradual Republican shift relative to national trends. In 2016, Clinton won Nevada by the same 2.4% margin, despite a narrower national popular vote margin. In 2022, Republicans capitalized on this trend by flipping the governor's office. The latest Real Clear Politics average shows Trump with a 0.7% lead over Harris across 9 polls. It's worth noting, however, that Trump only led in 3 of these 9 polls, and the average is skewed by a Trump +6 outlier from the Wall Street Journal. Without that one survey, Harris would be slightly ahead. Despite this caveat, Nevada receives a tilt Republican rating on the map. So, based on the latest polling averages in key battlegrounds, Trump is projected to secure 312 electoral votes, while Kamala Harris is projected to receive 226. As always, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this map and the state of the race in the comments.